Welcome to Just Chillin' and to a special edition of Just Chillin' as we focus on heat-related injuries. Once again, the number at the station is 368-2207. If you have any calls or comments, please do so. At this time, Dr. Clark, can you introduce yourself to Cleveland?
Yes, I am Dr. Walter Clark. I'm the medical director at Northeast Ohio Neighborhood Health Services Incorporated here in Cleveland, Ohio. We have about 5 health centers that serve the east side of Cleveland, that is east of the Cuyahoga River.
Okay, Dr. Clark, give our audience a little background information about yourself. Who is Dr. Clark?
Well, Dr. Clark is a physician who graduated from Howard University Medical School some years ago, about 22 years ago, in fact. Okay. And went down south for about 9 years, Mobile, Alabama, served as a commissioned, civil servant with the National Health Service Corps there. And moved back to Cleveland back in '88 and began serving Neon, or Huff Norwood, known affectionately as Huff Norwood, serving that facility for the past going on 13 years now.
Okay, Dr. Clark, we're talking about a very important issue, heat-related injuries. Why is that so important and such a concern?
Well, when I was called a couple of days ago to introduce or at least talk about this subject, I was made aware, though I didn't know at that time because I was seeing patients, that a rather well-known football player in the name of Corey Springer had passed away from heat stroke. So that made it very clear to me that, yes, I would like to talk a little bit about heat stroke and other kinds of problems with extreme heat conditions.
Okay, and Dr. Clark, you have something you're going to share with the audience.
Yeah, in fact, it's not my usual style to read, and I hate to do this, but at the same time, it's such an important issue that I don't want to waste anyone's time. I want to make as good a use of this time as possible, and therefore I've prepared a statement, and I would like to read it, if you don't mind.
That's perfect.
Okay, well, this information comes from the CDC, and I've sort of modified it a bit, just to make it even more relevant, but I didn't modify the content or the factual nature of it. But basically each year, more people in the United States die from extreme heat than from hurricanes, lightning, of course lightning wouldn't be surprising, tornadoes, floods, and earthquakes combined. During 1979 through 1998, a total of 7,421 deaths occurred in this country, which were attributed to excessive heat exposure. Isn't that something? On the average, approximately 300 people die each year from exposure to heat. This year, extreme heat is of particular concern because of the energy problems facing many Americans across this country. As you know, in California, and you know, the way it's as hot as it is today, I wouldn't be surprised it's an issue here in Cleveland. Right. Air conditioning is the #1 protective factor against heat-related illness. A lot of folks don't have those. Brownouts that last a few hours will likely have little effect on people's health. However, some people may be fearful because of high utility bills and limit their use of air conditioning. So some action can place people who are already at risk for heat illness at increased risk. And that's the problem.
I guess, Dr. Clark, what would you say to those older folks who are on fixed income who find themselves in that situation?
Well, there are people who you can call. I mean, you can call the utility company. Sometimes they give you a break on your electric bills. I know I've signed many a statement myself. Folks can bring a form that you can get from your utility company to a physician, and it can be signed, which says that this person needs this or needs that, needs their electricity even though they can't pay their bill, or they need an air conditioning unit. You can get those things through certain sources locally,
okay.
And those things are available. Well, you can help by learning the warning signs of heat stroke and heat exhaustion, and then checking on your neighbors frequently. And so, I mean, there are a lot of people that are close to us, and I think we need to look in on them, particularly if you think they may have some problems. Well, let's talk about people who suffer heat-related illness when their bodies are unable to adjust on the inside or compensate or properly cool themselves. The body normally cools itself by sweating, but under some conditions, sweating just isn't enough. In cases when a person is having trouble with internal heat overload, a person's body temperature begins to rise rapidly. This situation is kind of like a car's radiator when it's overheating. You've seen that. When a car radiator is unable to keep the engine cool, what happens? The engine or its internal parts can get damaged and actually melt down. So this is sort of like what happens to a person when they overheat. Things like their brain and internal organs can be damaged with excessive heat.
So you're saying a person is not sweating? They get so hot that they stop sweating?
Yeah. You can stop sweating. That's exactly right.
That's incredible.
Or you can keep sweating, but it's just not getting out. It's not allowing the heat to get out into the, to evaporate, to release the heat. I mean, the sweat evaporates, and that's what causes the loss of heat. But at a certain point, it just doesn't help. So there are several conditions that affect the body's ability to cool itself during extreme hot weather. And when the humidity is high, actually sweat will not evaporate as quickly, preventing the body from releasing this heat quickly. So under certain conditions like where there's a tendency to overheat, things like age, you need to be careful, particularly the elderly and the young children. Young children can't compensate as well. Their organism, their body hasn't adjusted or tuned in on the types of things they need to do to protect themselves. That's just the way, that's nature, okay? Heart disease, dehydration, mental illness even, poor circulation, sunburn, certain kinds of drugs, and consumption of alcohol beverages can also lead to a person's increased risk of having heat problems or adjusting or managing to cope with the heat once it starts taking place or getting higher in the body.
Okay, let's back up for a second, because I know a lot of folks who try to cool off with a cold one, as they say.
Yeah.
But it's working against them.
Oh, it's working big time against them. When I was growing up on 92nd Street, that's what folks would do. They'd play basketball and a little quart of Colt 45, and they thought that was something. Nice cold thing of Colt 45, and they were doing nothing but putting themselves at risk, particularly if they had to throw out a few J's and, and beat the opposing team. Summertime activity, whether on the playground like I was just talking about or at a building construction site is another example, must be carried out with much attention to things that can aid a body's ability to cool itself and prevent heat-related illness.
Okay, what about landscaping guys?
That's a tough job. I mean, when you see landscaping guys, you see them with nice coolers and they're not wearing much clothing, you know, and that's a good thing. They're getting a good suntan while they're at it, but yeah, they're at risk, and I'll talk a little bit about that.
Okay.
But let's talk about what is heat stroke. You heard heat stroke. Let's talk about it. Heat stroke is the most serious heat-related illness, and that's what Corey Stringer died of, heat stroke. He had a heat stroke. It occurs when the body becomes unable to control its temperature. The body's temperature rises rapidly. We talked about that. The sweating mechanisms fail. You stop sweating, in fact, just as we talked about earlier. And the body is unable to cool itself. Body temperature may rise to 106 degrees Fahrenheit or higher. And guess what? Within 10 to 15 minutes, when it really gets starting to eat on itself.
So what's normal, Doc, before you go?
98.6, okay? Heat stroke can cause death or permanent disability if emergency treatment is not provided. Well, of course, in Corey Stringer's case, it didn't cause disability, it caused death. What are the warning signs? Well, some of the warning signs have to do with your own body temperature. You know, say if somebody takes your temperature is 103. It's not because it's 103 outside, your body temperature is 103. You're red, hot, and your skin is actually dry. You're not sweating. It's turned off, okay? I mean, you see somebody out there huffing and puffing, they're not sweating at all, and they're an athlete. You know something's wrong. The pulse, you take their pulse, and it's just boom, 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 it's just rapid, and it's a strong pulse, in fact. Throbbing headache, dizziness, nausea. In fact, Corey Stringer, the day before he died, and there, hopefully we can get a picture, zoom in on a picture of him, he was leaning over on his knees, leaning over his hands on his knees. And the story in the plain dealer says that he threw up several times the day before, that hard practice, and his teammates ragged him for that. And as such, he said, look, tomorrow, guys, I'll be back, and I'll show you what training is all about. And that was the day that he unfortunately died. Confusion. unconsciousness. Those types of things are the warning signs of heat stroke. So what should a person do if they see someone with any of these warning signs of heat stroke? Well, the first thing you need to understand is this is a life-threatening emergency and somebody needs to call for a medical assistant. No, this is not something you take on yourself. I mean, they're throwing up, they're dizzy, they're confused, they're unconscious. I mean, they're black, it's hot, they've exercised, they're not sweating. It's time to call 911 in that situation. So, but then yes, there are some things you can do beyond trying to call for emergency. In fact, don't try to assist them. If you know it's a phone, like in cardiopulmonary resuscitation, the first thing you want to do is call 911. So you might run and go call 911 and then come back and assist the person. And then first thing you want to do is get them into a shady area. Okay, that's the first thing. Or hey, if you can cool, if there's a water hose around, throw some water on him. Don't worry about his clothing now. Hose them off of a garden hose if anything like that is available.
But, yeah. Doc, let me ask you this real quick. What about, I guess in Corey's situation, a lot of young people, cross country, football, even those landscape guys, they compete against each other like, how much grass can you cut today? How much football can you play? Guys out there on the roof doing the same thing.
Oh, man, yeah.
So what would you say to them to tell them to chill out a little bit?
Well, I'm going to get into that in just a moment. In fact, I mean, those are very good questions. But the first thing you want to do is deal with what you see. And so, yeah, you want to try to cool them off. You want to, if it's not, it's humid outside, you can actually throw a towel over them and then wet the towel, and sometimes that'll help. But you're just dealing with it until the folks who have responded to your 911 arrive. Don't give that person something that has got alcohol in the drink. Give them something, anything. If they're conscious, if they're unconscious, don't give them anything to drink, okay? Because they may aspirate. Yeah, but if they are somewhat conscious but confused, give them some water, give them some juice, give them some Gatorade or something to that effect. But again, 911, you need emergency assistance, okay? Now, there's such a thing as heat exhaustion. Now, we talk about heat stroke. Actually, there's 3 levels I'm going to talk about. Heat stroke, I just talked about that. Heat exhaustion, I'm getting ready to talk about, and then there are heat cramps. So it's kind of a gradual. You didn't know about all that, did you, Lynn? All right. Well, heat exhaustion is a milder form of heat-related illness that can develop after several days of exposure to high temperatures and inadequate or unbalanced replacement of fluids. Now, those who are prone to heat exhaustion are elderly, those of high blood pressure, and those working or exercising in, guess what, a hot environment. Okay, so what are the warning signs of heat exhaustion? The warning signs of heat exhaustion would include things like heavy sweating, paleness, muscle cramps, tiredness, weakness, dizziness, some of the same things I talked about earlier about heat stroke, headache, nausea, and vomiting. Corey Stringer had heat exhaustion the day before he died. If he had a stroke, he would have been in a hospital, okay? So the day before he died, he showed all the classical signs of heat exhaustion. Like I said, the dizziness, the headache. He wasn't feeling well. He had to quit practice early. Nausea and vomiting and fainting. He didn't faint, I don't think. Okay? The skin may be cool and moist. The pulse would be rapid and fast and weak. Breathing will be fast and shallow, kind of low. Heat exhaustion, if untreated, may progress to heat stroke. Okay? So in this case, you seek medical attention if the symptoms worsen or last longer than 1 hour. So after an hour of doing some things like drinking cool water, non-alcoholic beverages, resting, taking a cool shower, bath, or a sponge bath, find an air-conditioned area, and wearing lightweight clothing, take all the pads and shoulder pads and all the gear off and kind of cool out. If that's not happening, within an hour later, and folks still having the problems of heavy sweating, paleness, cramps, and tired, weak, dizzy, headache, nausea, vomiting, fainting, and all that kind of business, then it's time to seek medical attention.
Okay, Doc, we're going to take a music break.
Okay.
And we'll be back after this break. Thank you.
Crazy, I'm crazy.